What's going on, everyone? Now, I'm sure you read the title for this video and probably thought, isn't Astaroth going to be the time devil since he's a part of the evil trinity alongside Lucifer and Beelzebub? Now, while that is the most common belief, I'm going to express an alternative to that notion. So if Tabata ends up going the route I'm thinking of and saves Astaroth for what I'm about to tell you, then it could work out. Now, before we begin, if you're a returning viewer and you haven't already, be sure to turn on notifications so that you can be notified when a new Black Clover video drops. And if you're a new viewer, welcome. I hope you find this channel to your likings. Alright, let's begin. So, as I mentioned in the title, the MC is gonna what? Die. Well, maybe. That implies heavily on the difficulty of his fight with Lucifer. But what good would come from Asta dying? Well, I'm predicting that in this arc, Asta and Liebe will die while stuck together in devil union, and they'll be sent to the Underworld where they'll be reborn as a human-devil hybrid that uses anti-magic and eventually receive the name Astaroth. Now, before I dive into more details, let me explain my thought process as to how Asta could benefit from being in the Underworld. The first reason for me wanting Asta to go to the Underworld is to learn how to read and speak the language of devils in his grimoire. Now here's the tricky part about this. If they die and get sent to the Underworld, then they wouldn't have their grimoire. It would still be in the human world. So how would he practice if he doesn't have his grimoire? Well, let's assume that there is a way to learn how to read and speak devil language without a grimoire. As a matter of fact, there is a way to speak it without having one, because we've seen it before from Megicula when she used her curse wording magic, Malevolent Femcantation, and we also seen it from Zogred when he summoned the spear from the Underworld, which rots everything it touches. So we know devils don't need a grimoire to speak the language or use their spells. So there is a way to do so. But for now, let's run with the idea that it's possible to be taught. But who would teach them and why? That's something I'll explain when I start talking about Asta's journey as Astaroth. So that's my first reason for why Asta would benefit from being in the Underworld. My second is that Asta and Liebe could be an alternative to opening the gates to the Underworld without Yami and Vengeance. I mentioned this multiple times in previous videos that when Liebe passed through the gates, he appeared somewhere random in the human world. Whether it was coincidence that it was near where Lasita found a 5-leaf grimoire doesn't matter for this video. However, this lets me know that with the absence of the Qliphoth ritual, if you pass through the gates, you will appear somewhere random in the human world. So if this is the way the rest of the Qliphoth devils exit the Underworld after the gates are destroyed, then this would open the doors for exploring different areas in the Black Clover world, because the devils would appear in random areas in the human world and they're going to have to hunt them down. So if at some point Asta, during his time in the Underworld, get forced or tricked into destroying the gates from the inside, then this would allow for a worldwide exploration of the Black Clover world in the future. Okay, so that's reason number 2. Now, let's get into Asta and Liebe dying but being reborn as Astaroth. My prediction is that during this fight with Lucifer, he's going to die. Whether it's from some unforeseen accident, or being killed by a fully manifested Lucifer, or from going past his original 5-minute devil union timer and begin to destroy his body until he's dead. How could he go past his 5-minute time limit? Well, I see 2 ways. The first is the most Black Clover way, which would be surpassing his limits. Duh. However, I don't want to see that, especially since when the timer expires, they immediately separate. So this would feel pretty weird to me if they didn't. However, the second option is far more interesting than the first one, and it feels more realistic than surpassing my limits. The second option involves Nero using her ultimate sealing magic to keep Asta and Liebe fused together in devil union even longer. Now, it's more believable that she'll use it to close the gates to the Underworld, right? But when you think about it, the gate should close itself if they save Yami and Vengeance, right? So unless Tabata activates his favorite go-to word like the good old however, then the option for Nero to close the gates will stay off the table. But for the sake of this prediction, I'll continue with Nero using ultimate sealing magic. So in the future, I think there will be a scenario where Asta will be willing to sacrifice his own body to neutralize a threat if it requires him to stay in Devil Union even longer. Now to picture how this would look, think about Guts from Berserk and how he can still feel pain while using his Berserker armor, but his mind doesn't interpret the pain as being a problem, which allows him to ignore it. This is how I envision Asta dying while being forced to stay in Devil Union even longer, because he's trying to protect everyone. And this is bad because we already know that using Black Mode in Devil Union puts his body into a lot of pain. So exceeding the 5-minute limit will shorten his life and eventually kill him the longer he goes. Okay, so moving along to Asta and Liebe dying, but the seal that kept the two of them stuck together never wears off after they die. So they die while stuck together in Devil Union. So how will this trigger them being reborn in the Underworld? This is an answer I don't have, since we don't have enough information on how devils are born in the Underworld, except for the fact that they just are. But one thing is for sure, Asta isn't seeing heaven. Sorry, but there's no chance Asta sees heaven since he uses devil powers. So the question is, where would Asta go? Now, I know the fourth Zogrades planned on killing people and have them reborn in undying bodies, right? So I don't know whether the fourth Zogrades is going to have a hand in Asta's rebirth, but for the sake of this prediction, let's just assume that Asta and Liebe are reborn in the Underworld, but as one being. Whether it's caused by the fourth Zogrades or by some other means, we'll just roll with it. So as of right now, they're reborn as a human-devil hybrid, which is pretty much just a devil with human emotions, which is also something Megicula was interested in, which I'll get to soon. So Asta and Liebe are now in the Underworld as one being and will now begin their journey through the Underworld. This journey would mirror the real Astaroth from Demonology, where Asta would meet a serpent, an infernal beast, which is depicted as a dragon or a wolf, but it's a being that Astaroth would ride. Then he would meet 4 devils who would assist and work under him: Amon, Barbatus, Reshavarok, and Prufless. In addition, over time, Asta would spread his influence and command his own legion of devils, just as the real Astaroth did. And just so you know, this isn't the exact order it happens in. I was just listing them in an order I thought it could go. So all of that sounds good, but there's one problem I haven't addressed, which is what level in the Underworld would Asta be reborn on? The level I think would make the most sense is the level Megicula is on, which would be level 7. Now hold the phone. Why would Megicula be down there? She's a supreme devil, but she's not one of the 3 rulers. She should be located somewhere else on the Qliphoth tree, right? Well, let's take a look at the real Qliphoth tree real quick. Notice anything strange? I don't see Megicula anywhere on here. Now, I'm not saying that Megicula not being a part of the real life Qliphoth tree means that she isn't mapped to the one in Black Clover. However, when you look at the real deal, someone on this list has to get bumped off for Megicula. Now, the consensus is that Megicula is a supreme devil located on level 5 right above Lucifugus, who people believe is on level 6, which means Asmodeus would have to get the boot in place of Megicula. This could work 2 ways, where Asmodeus does get the boot, but ends up being placed at a different level, or this devil could just sit tight at level 5. But first, here's why Asmodeus staying and Megicula ending up on level 7 makes sense. Thinking back to when Megicula first emerged from Varnica, I wonder why Megicula would be worried about being caught by Lucifero if she's on an entirely different level. Just how sneaky would she have to be? Then it started to hit me that she may as well be on Lucifero's level, which would be level 7. Trying to go unnoticed seems more difficult here because we know Megicula at the time was partially manifested into Varnica's right eye. So her body back in the underworld could have been idle, or she could have had a spell wrapped around her that put her body on autopilot during the time she was with Vonica. Although we eventually found out that Lucifer was well aware and let her do it as a test run. So if we take Megicula and shove her down to level 7, then this would allow one of the Qliphoth devils from the real life tree to reclaim its spot by removing Megicula out the picture. Now back to how this connects to Asta. Think back to when Megicula was defeated and sent back to the Underworld. Right before she faded away, she mentioned that she became interested in human emotions. Now, if what I said about Megicula being on level 7 holds to be true, now let's say she's currently being punished by the rulers in a separate location from them, and during Asta's journey, he comes across the location she's being punished at. Remember earlier when I said Asta would learn how to read and speak the language of devils, but that devil would teach him for its own benefit. Megicula has already witnessed Asta in the human world and is aware of the possibilities of anti-magic. So if she teaches Asta the ins and outs of devil powers, then in return Asta could not only teach her about human emotions, but make Asta strong enough to use anti-magic spells capable of freeing her from her punishment. Perhaps they even form a temporary alliance for a potential civil war against the other rulers with the legion that Asta gathered or will gather on his journey. I also think at some point during their interaction, Megicula would give Asta and Liebe new human devil hybrid form, a name to call them by. I imagine it looking something like this. She'll take Asta's human name and discard the name that Liebe was given to him from Lasita, which is a human, and then Megicula will go ahead and name his devil side Roth. Then she'll add both of the names together and call them Astaroth. Okay, so that covers why I think Asta, Megicula, in level 7 would be an ideal fit. Next, what if Asmodeus gets the boot from level 5 of the Qliphoth tree and gets replaced by Megicula? Where would that devil Asmodeus go now? Well, both Lucifero and Beelzebub were once seraphims that fell from heaven, while the other two seraphims were Leviathan and Asmodeus. So that creates another option for Asmodeus being inserted as one of the rulers of the Underworld if it got booted from level 5. That's not the only hint, but in a book called the Malleus Maleficarum, it mentions that Asmodeus is one of the kings of hell under the Emperor Lucifer. So that would make the three rulers Lucifero, Beelzebub, and Asmodeus, or even Leviathan. And speaking of Leviathan, him and Astaroth actually have major beef with each other. It's so bad that Lucifer and Satan in the lore have to keep those two from starting a civil war in hell, which ties back to my other prediction about Megicula and Astaroth teaming up for a civil war against the rulers. So if Leviathan or Asmodeus ends up being the time devil, you heard it here first. Okay, so let's sum up everything I said. First, Asta and Liebe will die this arc after destroying their bodies because Nero used her ultimate sealing magic to keep them fused together even longer, thus they exceeded their 5-minute time limit. Then you have Asta and Liebe will be reborn in the Underworld. However, since they were fused when they died, they're now one being when they were born. This new human-devil hybrid will eventually earn the name Astaroth, and in his new body will journey throughout the Underworld, pulling off the same things Astaroth did in the lore, which is meet a serpent, an infernal beast, his 4 assistants, and eventually gather up enough followers to have his own legion. Then Asta will eventually meet Megicula at level 7 in the Underworld, and they'll make a deal to teach him how to get the most out of his devil powers by using spells in devil language. So Asta will learn to read and speak devil language. In exchange, Megicula will learn more about human emotions from Asta, while also getting strong enough to free her from her punishment. This will possibly lead to a temporary alliance between Astaroth and Megicula that will lead towards a civil war against the rulers. And lastly, instead of Astaroth being the time devil, it will either be Asmodeus or Leviathan. Although I'm hoping it's Leviathan because the reasons I mentioned before about him and Astaroth having beef. If it happens to be Leviathan, then you heard it here first. Okay, so this might be the longest video I've made, but these are all the thoughts within my head as to why Astaroth will end up being just Asta and Liebe reborn as one being. What do you think? Are you down for Asta exploring the Underworld as Astaroth, forming his own legion and leading a civil war against the devils during his time down there? I'd love to discuss this in the comments. I'm also going to expand on some of these plot points in a different video in the future. Definitely the Civil War in Hell as one of them. Okay, well, that's it for me. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit that like button. Alright, have a good day. Peace out.